Hello and welcome to the video. I've been really excited to make this one for a while. These are the books I read in January 2026. So for some quick context, I've been trying to really get into reading for a while now. I've been trying on and off here and there for a year or two, and I find that I'd buy a book, read a bit, put it down, forget about it and move on with my life. But really this journey started because I accidentally got into philosophy by watching videos, and I started to buy philosophy and read philosophy, and I found myself struggling because it's been so long since I've read that reading a challenging text like that was quite intimidating and hard for me to do. So as a result of that, I thought I better just try reading some shorter books, maybe some literature, instead of just reading non-fiction all the time. And I found out I think I enjoy fiction a lot more than non-fiction for the most part, at least right now. So the start of that journey began with White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This book I went for first because I thought it's quite short. I had the copy of it. I've been interested in Dostoevsky for a while and his life, so why not start with one of his short stories? I thought it was really well written. I thought it was an interesting story. I really do like Dostoevsky's writing style of how he really just gets into a character's head and just somehow describes what they're feeling with such intensity that you begin to feel it yourself. I really liked how flamboyantly the main character spoke. I thought at first I wouldn't really get along with it, and I'm not sure if it's just my translation or if it was originally intended to be read like that when it was written in Russian, but I think it really adds to his character that he speaks like he's from a Shakespearean play, because the whole thing with the main character is he hasn't really lived his life. He's just lived his life through literature and plays and spending time on his own dreaming about what his life would be like if he were to be in one of these novels or plays. So that when he eventually does meet someone he's interested in, a lady who I believe is called Nastenka, he seems to really latch on to her and gets absolutely infatuated with her. He starts dreaming about their romance together, about his love for her, and the reality is this never really came to fruition. It was all built up in his head, almost like a sort of limerence. The issue is this girl, Nastenka, is also lonely, but for a different reason than our main character. Nastenka's waiting for her lover to come home to her, and as the novel goes on, it seems increasingly likely that this lover isn't going to return as their relationship grows. But obviously, being a Dostoevsky novel, it is quite tragic, and the ending might not go as you would have thought. I don't want to spoil the books too much in this video, because hopefully you guys will read them as well, right? But for me personally, I thought it was very well written. It was a good introduction into literature, but it didn't resonate with me on a personal level as much, so I didn't get too much out of it. I'll quickly touch on the extra short story that was included in the back of this Penguin print, and that was a short story called Bobok. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. I thought it was quite interesting. I thought it was hilarious. After doing some research on it, it seems like the characters in there are kind of parodies of characters from Dostoevsky's other novels. They're quite tropey, but it was really a bit of a supernatural comedy. It has nothing to do with White Nights itself. It was just an extra bonus story thrown in there. I think due to the characters being quite Dostoevsky coded, you're probably meant to read his other works before you then get into that one. But for me, I kind of got a bit of a peek into his religious views, and if anything it just made me more interested to read the rest of his novels. But overall, it wasn't anything major that I think about on a day-to-day basis or anything like that. So moving on from Dostoevsky, after that I read The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima. This book is another one that was just beautifully written. The prose was like absolute poetry. The description of the characters' thoughts and feelings were amazing. It really felt like you were inside their head again. Not too much really goes on in this novel. It's quite a slow burner, but it's more of a character piece than it is an actual story. You know, you've got different aspects of each character, and they kind of all have a darker side to them, which you begin to see more and more as the novel goes on. Especially the group of boys, who almost reminded me of the boys in The Lord of the Flies, and they have their own very violent and weird philosophy on the world, which again, I don't want to spoil. It's not late into the book or anything, but I think the best way to read this novel is to go in without really knowing anything. There are a few key parts of the book which were very impactful, but overall it was how beautifully written it was and how much the themes of the book resonated with me that really made it stand out. It's a book about masculinity and fatherhood and really just the challenge of finding out what you want to do and who you want to become. I think the ending of the book can be seen as a nightmare story, but I really think if you look into the characters' views, it's kind of a bittersweet ending, and one that I have thought about quite a few times after finishing the book. So I would hesitantly recommend this book. I think it's really well written, but the book's themes might not resonate with you as much, so you might think it's a bit of a boring book where nothing really happens. But like I said, it's really a character piece, and understanding their philosophies and how they see the world that makes it so interesting. So after reading that, I then moved back to Dostoevsky, where I read The Meek One. I'm not really sure how to describe this book, so I think I'm just going to read the blurb first. Based on a St. Petersburg news report, Dostoevsky's searing tale of a man who drives his wife to suicide. So it's written from the character's first point perspective, which gives it a really, again, interesting writing style, where some parts of it can almost feel a bit sloppy, but deliberately, because it's coming from this man who just refuses and denies any accountability for what's happened, or at least that's the way I read it. I think a lot of the language can be read in that sort of way. There was specific use of the word die that I really found interesting near the end of the novel. I'm not going to go into it too much because I don't have the time, and once again I don't want to spoil it, but I wrote a couple pages, like an essay, in the back of the book because I just immediately had so many thoughts about it when I was reading it. I almost annotated every other page. There was just so much to go into it, and I really think that's special because a lot of the time if you watch a well-crafted film, for example, you don't really pick up on every little detail until you watch it for that second or third time. But for me, I picked up on so much of the novel on the first read, which is really just a testament to how well used language was by Dostoevsky when writing this. And it also, made me quite proud of myself because I was getting better at reading. So it's incredibly short. Again, I read it in one sitting. I forgot to mention if I did with this one, but this book is only 150 pages. Again, I read it in one sitting. So this one, I believe, is even shorter than White Nights, so you can read it very quick. It is quite a heavy book, obviously, as you can probably tell by the blurb, but as a sort of study piece, it's really interesting to read. I think if you go into it wanting just an interesting story to read, to entertain yourself with, you might not get much from it. But if you go into it really looking to delve into how Dostoevsky told this story and the language he used, I think you can really get a lot out of it, specifically because of that way it's written in the first person, in the past tense, almost like an account of the story or a diary. And it really interested me how you kind of see the thoughts and feelings of this character just warp up to a better point in the midpoint of the story before they drastically drop back down again. At least that's my interpretation of it. Sorry if that sounded a bit wishy-washy. It's hard to talk about the book without spoiling it because it's so short. Moving on after that, I read a book which you probably wouldn't have been expecting. But I read Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, before I even talk about this, I understand I am not the target audience for this book, and I wasn't really destined to enjoy it, but I will say, without being too harsh, this book is written like absolute shit. It's so poorly written. The whole selling point of the book is this massive twist. It's all over the blurb, all over social media. When I read the twist, I put down the book and laughed out loud because I just thought it was so boring and predictable and just impacted the story in no way. But the way I see this book is almost the way that people watch trash TV. Like, for example, people watch Love Island on TV. They know it's absolute garbage, but they just can't stop watching it. Something allures you into it. And that's how I felt about Verity. I knew it was written awfully, but I couldn't stop turning the page. I got through it so quick. It is an easy book to read. There's a lot of dialogue. The font size is quite large, so it felt like a pretty short book, really, for how chunky it actually is. All I can really say is I enjoyed it as a casual read, but I didn't get anything from the book. I'm not going to be returning to Colleen Hoover. Once again, I know I'm not the target audience. I just realised it's going to look really weird if I don't explain the context of why I read Verity. So I was doing research on what book to get my girlfriend for Christmas because she's been getting into reading as well. And I thought she would enjoy this one, it had good reviews online. And I read the start of it briefly to see if it would be something she liked. So I gave it to her. She really enjoyed it, again, as just a casual read. And she went, "Sean, I want you to read it." So I went, "Fine, I'll take a break from the book that I was reading at the time, which I'll move on to next." So that was why I read the book. I didn't just pick it up because I wanted to. My girlfriend just wanted me to read it so I could talk to her about it, I guess. So I won't say too much more in case I offend her. So moving on from that awful book, the last book I'm going to talk about is one that I've been reading for a while because it's quite hard for me to get through, and that is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. This book is probably going to take up the longest portion of the video. So I haven't actually finished it yet. I've got about 50 pages left, I want to say, but I couldn't not talk about this book. McCarthy has a really interesting writing style. First of all, he doesn't really tend to use much punctuation at all. There's no quotation marks when a character's speaking. You won't see any semicolons or anything like that. All you really get is full stop and the occasional comma. Meaning, even by just reading it, you're technically putting your own interpretation of the text into your head, as you're deciding where the pauses in each sentence goes. Upon hearing this, you might think, that just seems like a childish, unprofessional, and unenjoyable reading style, but McCarthy somehow nails it. If there's 3 characters talking in dialogue, for example, you can always tell who is speaking before it even says. He's just somehow mastered it. I don't know how he does it, but McCarthy feels like one of the only writers who can really get away with writing in that style. And I would argue that writing style actually benefits how you read the book. For example, there's one scene I remember specifically. There's a bunch of men riding across the desert towards the main characters, and there's one sentence describing this, which nearly goes along an entire page, and it just continues to say, and this, and that, and this, so on and so forth. And it really just intensifies the moment, and it really just fills you with that same dread and feeling of impending doom that the characters in the story at that point were feeling. But what really interests me about this book are the philosophical and religious themes throughout the novel. I guess since I'm diving so deep into this novel, I should probably give context on what the book is actually about. Back during America's westward expansion, so the Wild West, there was a gang called the Glanton Gang, which were contracted by the Mexican government to basically kill the natives in the land. And the reason they would do this is because if they then scalped the heads of the natives they killed, they could bring them back to the Mexican government and they would be paid per scalp they delivered, essentially proving their death. So it means it's an incredibly violent story. It's quite hard to read, obviously not just because of his writing style, but also because of the extreme gore and violence going on in the book. It's a very bleak novel, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But going back to what I was talking about previously, there's a character riding alongside the gang called the Judge. And the Judge has his own very unique philosophy on the world. It's incredibly disturbing, and I don't want to spoil this, as you kind of get more tidbits about the Judge revealed as the story progresses, and that's almost the through line that just keeps me going with each turn of the page. I'm just waiting to discover more about the Judge, because this Judge has this real command over the group. He's not even the leader of the gang. That would be Glanton, which the gang is named after. But he just has this absolute control over what the members of the gang do and think. So it's a really interesting dichotomy between the Judge's philosophy and the rest of the gang's philosophy, because their philosophy is really just a lack of philosophy. And the religious themes present are hard for me to describe without spoiling the novel, so I'll leave it there for now. The way it all ties together is profoundly impactful when you're reading the book. It's not just a novel about gore, violence and killing. It's a novel about life, death and humanity itself. And I just find it really interesting because, like I said at the beginning of this video, I got into reading for the sake of reading philosophy. But what I've realised is, when I'm reading a book like Blood Meridian, or when I'm reading Mishima or Dostoevsky, there's something beautiful about reading literature that's infused with philosophy. Because instead of reading a non-fiction philosophy book, where a great thinker will tell you, you should act like this, you should think like this, when reading literature, it's almost like you experience these stories yourself. You really get engrossed into them, and the teachings are there for you to dissect and take from the text. It's not handed to you on a silver platter. You almost have to work for it, work to understand what the author's trying to say. And I think that leads to more impactful reading, because you can kind of pluck out the points that stick out to you and make sense to you. It means that you have a fable, a guiding story to remind you of why this philosophy is important, or why a philosophy is dangerous. So although I do still have great philosophical books I need to finish, which I haven't talked about in this video, such as Plato's Republic and the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, I think moving forward in the next month, I'm going to continue to read a lot of literature. For example, after I do finish Blood Meridian, I think I'm going to move on to another Dostoevsky book, where I have Notes from the Underground. It's quite a bit longer than White Knight and the Meek one, but not as long as Crime and Punishment or The Brothers Karamazov. So after I've read that, I then do have Crime and Punishment to go to if I just want more of Dostoevsky's writing style. However, I also have books like Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka and The Fall by Albert Camus that I want to get through as well. So next month's reading recap could be absolutely anything, to be honest. I have plenty of books I want to get through, so I won't give you exact answers of what I'm going to read. You'll just have to wait and see next month. I wasn't planning on doing this, but if I was to quickly rank the books I read this month, obviously Verity's at the bottom. There's no need to read that. Then it would probably be White Knights. Maybe controversial. I know a lot of people love this book. This really seems to have a resurgence in the last few years. It just didn't resonate with me personally. After that, I'd say the Meek one. I really got a lot from this book, even on the first reading, and even considering how short it was. Then it's kind of a toss-up between these last two, because I do think Blood Meridian is going to go on to be one of my favourite pieces of fiction ever, but I can't fully say until I've finished the book. I was kind of spoiled on the ending before even picking up the book, to be honest, but I'm not too annoyed about it, because it just meant that I went out of my way to start reading the book in the first place. So even though unfortunately I do sort of know how it ends, I just want to actually read it myself before I give my full opinion on the book. So for now, I guess the best book I read this month was The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Mishima. It was really impactful to me. The themes really resonated with me. But as I said, Blood Meridian will likely overtake it, sort of already has. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next month for the books I read in February.